All right, so this is the Tuesday, January 9th meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee. I'm going to call the members to order. Nick Pavas is joining us virtually.
I'm here. Nick?
Dan,
Here.
Mark,
Here.
Phil,
Here.
and I'm here, Laura. Mariana was unable to join us at this time, but she said she is going to try to pop in and at least listen into part of this, but she's not sure she'll be able to make it. But we do have a quorum, so we can get started. All right, so the first order of business is to review and approve, review and make any changes to the minutes of December 6th. Thank you, Mark, for sending these over. Did folks get a chance to read these?
Yes.
And what, did anybody have any changes that they had indicated they wanted to make to these minutes?
No.
Nope. I'm good with them. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
All right, Mark,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Fantastic. All right, so for a chair's report, I have a few things that I just wanted to highlight. So the first thing is that I had a wonderful meeting with Ginger Reiner, who is a member of the bike pedestrian committee in the town of Lincoln. I'm not sure if she's the chair, but she's been on the committee since it was formed. And she gave me a few things that she wanted me to bring here to alert everybody to. And some ideas came up, and I think that she also shared some things that I think are good lessons for us to learn from our neighbors. So the things that came up in our discussion is, number one, there was a discussion of a grade separated crossing of Route 2 at Sandy Pond Road. So this is right on the Lincoln border, where the new overpass was built several years ago. Unfortunately, when they built that overpass, they did not think about how pedestrians and cyclists might use it. And there is a need for more crossing points at Route 2. That particular, oh, Terry's just entered the meeting room. Let me just make sure I can see when people, sorry, I'll be doing a little bit of management. As we know, crossing Route 2 has come up over and over in our discussions. It's come up in the survey data that we've seen, came up in the public workshop. So this particular crossing hasn't been of great discussion in the past, but the interesting thing that she said is that there was a meeting in 2022, so 2 years ago. Marcia Rasmussen and Delia Kay from Concord were present. It was a meeting with the Department of Transportation, MassDOT, and it was determined, they explored several different possible ways for there to be better connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists at that location. They looked at like a trail through the woods. They looked at a couple of different things, and it was determined that there was a preferred alternative was to create a safe pedestrian and cyclist crossing using the off-ramp of one of the shoulders, or the shoulder of an off-ramp, excuse me. So the plan was to reduce the off-ramp to one lane and provide a barrier separation for a two-way path. There was enough room. It's like a 32-foot wide stretch, so there's tons of room there that could be used. MassDOT is working on a similar project in Medford. I'm quoting an email that was forwarded to me that said that in 2022. So it'd be really interesting to see how that project went over the last 2 years. And the next step out of that meeting was for Concord to submit a project initiation form to MassDOT. And I haven't had a chance to follow up with the planning department yet to find out if that project initiation form was submitted. The land is technically in Concord, although it's right on the Lincoln border. So the Bike Ped Committee in Lincoln saw it as being of great value to their constituents, but that particular land they didn't have any control over, so they needed Concord to take action in order for that project to move forward. One thing to note is that it would not be eligible for shared streets funding, but I think there was some discussion about where the funding might come from during that meeting. I don't have all of the notes for that meeting. I just have like a few bullet points.
So Laura, can I just jump in?
Yeah.
So I attended the meeting, and I know it sounds somewhat sketchy, but in fact, the road is very wide at that point. And the idea was that rather than a construction project, the separation would be using Jersey barricades. So the costs should be relatively
Relatively low.
minimal.
Mhm.
Jersey barricades aren't expensive. They would need to close down the exit ramp, but that could be done at night, and you need to use machines, but it probably could be accomplished with a couple of construction days. If you'd like, I can drive over with you and I can show you exactly what the idea is. It's pretty straightforward. And the reason for Lincoln's interest in this is that it would allow a direct connection of Sandy Pond Road, which used to connect kind of like Baker Avenue, but that connection was severed when Route 2 was built. Because there is in fact a little bit of Sandy Pond Road that's on the Concord side of Route 2.
Mhm.
That would provide a nice connection for bicyclists. The alternative is a much longer route from Lincoln Center to Concord Center.
Mhm. So we don't have this on our agenda tonight, so we can't deliberate on it. I just wanted to make everybody aware of it and say that we should follow up on this at a subsequent meeting. Any other questions about that before I move on to the other things?
I think it'd be good. I think there's several opportunities there.
Yeah.
And it's a very doable project because the costs are pretty minimal.
And that was the thing that came across from my conversation with Ginger, is it seemed like this was very implementable. So I'd love to find out, where did the roadblocks come
And I think
from?
there's lessons to be learned applicable to
Yep.
other
Yeah.
cases. So it would be great to have that on the agenda.
Yeah. The other thing that came up in our conversation, I don't want to forget the people who are in the meeting room. All right, so the other thing that came up in my conversation with Ginger was, I mentioned that, the connection between Concord and West Concord has come up over and over in our discussions. And I mentioned the fact that at one point, there was a little bit of discussion about pursuing a possible rail with trail scenario with the MBTA that would connect the two town centers. Ginger was very excited about that idea and said that she would love to find a champion on her committee to work with a champion on our committee to just explore that possibility, because there's a lot of research and work and talking with folks over at MBTA to find out if that's possible, that needs to happen. So if there was a member of this committee who wanted to take that on as, let's find out what the feasibility of that is, what are the roadblocks, there would be interest from their committee in working with us on that. Phil's raising his hand, good. And one thing to note, and I was gonna pull up a visual to share, but I didn't get my ducks in a row when I got here. And I've got too many people in the waiting room. Okay. There is, if you want to see an example of rails with trails, there is one being constructed. There's one underway in Belmont, which is part of the Mass Central Trail that they're constructing. And so that's going to provide the link from the city all the way out to Northampton, which is pretty cool. But it's a good example of the municipality and working with the MBTA to create some pedestrian and cycling infrastructure adjacent to a commuter rail line. And that is our commuter rail line, if I'm not mistaken. So, and I would also add to this that there's been discussion at the Climate Action Committee about interest in connecting the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail with the Assabet River Rail Trail, which is a rail trail that begins at the South Acton train station and goes down into Maynard. And so if we were to, let's wave our magic wand and do what we want, and if we were to build a rail with trail that went from Lincoln to South Acton, that would not only connect Lincoln and Concord Center and West Concord, but also us to the Assabet, the Bruce Freeman to the Assabet River Rail Trail. So it would really help with the bike network issue. So that came up in our conversation. Any questions about that?
Just one observation. That came up at another meeting, and the one from West Concord to South Acton, that goes through EPA Superfund site. I think it's Superfund site, the the Gray site, and it also goes through wetlands. That would be a very challenging and expensive, connection.
The current train line goes through a Superfund
Yes,
site?
yes, yes.
Oh, delightful. But always a good thing to find out more information and figure out, there may be alternatives that we haven't considered there. The 2 lessons learned, or 3 lessons learned that I just wanted to share from Lincoln that we could be looking at a little bit more closely is that they completed a bike and ped master plan a few years ago. I think it's worth it for us as homework to take a look at that document, and see what might be most helpful to replicate here in Concord. I think that that master plan might be a good, we might be able to figure out a few things to pull out of that and incorporate into our final study document. So I think that, and it would also be good to see where are they planning to make their investments, because there may be some places along the border where we want to take advantage of their investments over time. Last 2 things are that they have a structure for their bike ped committee, which is it's the equivalent of the TAC. They don't have another body that deals with transportation. So they have a structure for the bike ped committee to meet quarterly with their equivalent of the TMA, their staff group, the head of police and the head of public works, and in a public meeting setting, as well as liaisons from several other committees. So it might be worth replicating that structure here in Concord. They're calling it a task force. So I think that, I'm not sure if it's a permanent committee or if it's just a temporary task force, but I'm hoping to go to that next meeting so that I can see how they're structuring that.
Could you give us the time of that meeting in case?
Sure. I'll take a look. And I will say that if you go on the Lincoln Town website, they would love to meet all of us if we have time to go to their meeting so that we can build a stronger relationship there. And then the last lesson from Lincoln that might have a bit of homework for us is that they've just made, they tried out an interesting traffic calming technique, it's called an advisory shoulder. I know Phil's familiar with this, which is a way of striping the road to indicate that bikes and pedestrians have priority over cars in certain locations. So they have one road in particular that they chose for an advisory shoulder. And they had it as a pilot and they have now made it permanent. It seems to be working well for them. Do you remember what road it's on? I forgot to write it down.
I'll find it.
But it might be worthwhile to just take a trip over there. Maybe not when there's so much snow on the ground, but when we can actually see the pavement markings. I'm not suggesting a site walk, but just if you're going through Lincoln, I think it'd be interesting to go and see it. Those are used, advisory shoulders are used in rural areas in the US, but they're used very broadly in Europe, in areas where they're trying to foster pedestrian and cyclist traffic. So I think it'd be worth us just seeing what they're doing over in Lincoln.
And that's, it's Farrar Road.
Farrar, yes.
Is it simply striping on the ground or is there signage as well?
There may be signage as well, but my understanding is that it's mostly about the way that they've striped the road. So instead of a double yellow line down the middle, it has, it would be like having an unmarked road, which is what most of our roads are in Concord, but they've marked the shoulders quite far in to indicate that there are going to be pedestrians and cyclists using that area. And if you're in a car, you have to go around them. That's not your space. That is space where you are a guest as a car. So
It appears they've also taken bypass road off of the turn down to 2, and they've widened they've moved the outer striping in by about a foot. And it appears to be, indicating a bike path. And it really hasn't impacted the width of the drivability either, so.
yeah, I think that there's a lot of creative stuff we could be doing with striping, and that's one of the nice things about that is that striping is already in our budget. And so if we can just think about how to stripe in a way that calms traffic, that'd be good. I don't want to take too much more time. The last thing I just want to say for the chair's report, besides the conversation that I had with Ginger Reiner, is that I ran into Rep. Cataldo, and he let me know that MassDOT is moving. We know that they've been working on that Route 2 corridor study. That's what the Ornac crossing study was a part of. It's a much larger study that looks at sort of the Route 2 corridor. I don't know exactly from where to where. There's very little information about it online, which has been a great frustration because I wanted to read more about it. I reached out to Rep. Cataldo's office and asked his aide what he knows about it, and he said that MassDOT is still working on their outreach plan, and they will be scheduling public meetings over the next few months. I'm supposed to be on the distribution list for that. So hopefully I'll get some notification when that happens, and I will certainly send it out to the committee. No meetings have been planned yet, is what Rep. Cataldo's aide has said. The things that are important is that this deals with the rotary, this deals with all of our crossings. There is a proposal to actually widen the highway in several places, and I think that, I think that we should look at highway widening in the midst of a climate crisis with great skepticism, personally. So that is something that we need to have on our radar, and we'll be able to engage as stakeholders on that. All right, so that's my chair's report. I'm just going to pause and ask if there are any questions. Just quick questions from anybody.
This gentleman, I don't know his name on the screen, he mentioned the Superfund site, trains. Where is that? The site that the MBTA line crosses through Superfund site? Where's that site?
Just west of Old Stowe Road, there's the former Grace plant. That's
Oh, right, the 2229 Main Street.
no.
That's
That's on the other side of Route 62. If you, do you know where Old Stowe Road is?
Yeah, I live like 3 houses, like I live right
Okay,
there.
if you go across if you're coming from Route 62 Main Street and you cross
Yeah.
the railroad bridge, if you take
Yeah.
an immediate left, there's a pathway there. There used to be.
Yeah, I've
That
walked
would
it,
take you right into the back. That would go along the train tracks eventually and take you right into the back of the Grace property, which is polluted.
Oh, right, that's where the Grays, right, okay.
Yeah, if anybody's interested in learning more about Superfund sites, there's a great map, interactive map on the internet, which will blow your mind, and not in the good way.
What's the site?
I'll try to pull it
Okay,
up after the meeting. Yeah, it's the EPA has an
Right,
interactive
no, it's good
map.
to know.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay, great. All right, so we're moving on to the discussion of local public transit services. So this has been on our agenda on and off over the last several months, and my main purpose in putting this on our agenda today is to figure out what are our next steps. We've talked about the need for a local bus service. We've just written a letter in support of the micro transit program that the Economic Vitality Director and the Tourism Director are working on. Obviously, we know from previous grant rounds that there is no guarantee that we will get that grant. It's probably a bit of a long shot. And so I think that we should be continuing the discussion about how do we find sources of funding, how can we be working in a deliberate way towards launching some kind of a public transit service here in Concord. But maybe the first question is that a premature discussion to be having? I feel like it's very well established that there's a need for public transit, and we've discussed it at length, but I think that we need to be very clear about what we're trying to do with the public transit
Well,
topic.
if I can, I know that I asked Alan Cathcart where that was in the Public Works budget, and it was, I think it's the fourth thing, which is $300,000 budget for various things along the lines of studies and what we should be doing long run. So I think that's where he has it earmarked, if that funding survives, is that's where the staff would initiate an investigation of it, right? Now, that also then plays into the Stantec study that's being done, and whatever comes out of that study in terms of articulating a need for public transit or whatever, okay? So I think those are structurally where it is right now.
We have a lot of control over what comes out of the study, and so I think my motivation for asking this question is what are the questions we need to be asking and answering as we go through this study, so that we come out of the study with an actionable plan. Because, you know, we're talking about the $300,000 in the FY25 budget, so that's not this year. You know, I think that we need to be continuously working on this and not waiting for the result. You know, we need to be using the study as the vehicle for driving the thing forward. So my question is, what do we need to get out of the study? What are the questions that need to be answered? You know, what's sort of the research prompt that we need to be asking Stantec to perform for us, and what is the what's the tangible deliverable that we're asking for on this?
Well, I would say, first of all, I'm absolutely in support of some kind of public transit. And I think the first question is, what is our likely population base of users, and who are they? So, you know, what are the numbers? And, you know, we're talking about potentially school children, because obviously we have kids going back and forth to the various schools on either side of Route 2. And you know, these are the kids who are not serviced for whatever reason by the public school bus. The population of elderly people who may not either choose to drive or be able to drive. So you have that population. You have population of handicapped people who might not be otherwise served by other means of transportation. I mean, I'm just kind of spitballing here. There are people who I think might find it more convenient not to have to drive their car, or for other reasons want to have a bus. So, and I can certainly imagine myself wanting to ride my bike one way across Route 2 and then finding that it would be nice to be able to ride the bus back because it's raining or snowing or night or whatever. So, you know, a one-way trip type person. So I would hope that the Stantec study helps us to find that information. The second thing.
Just to clarify, you're basically talking about market research.
Market research.
Okay.
Who's it? The second thing is what alternatives we might have that might already exist, and that gets us right back to the Crosstown Connect thing with Acton. I have a question, which is, at one point in time, there was a proposal for us to become a part of Crosstown Connect. And that got kiboshed, I think, because of the pandemic. And I really don't understand why that has not risen back up higher in terms of possibilities.
So in terms of putting that in the question, should we rejoin Crosstown Connect?
I don't think we were ever actually part of it. I think there was a proposal to become.
We're on their website, so we were a part of it in some fashion.
In some fashion, right. And somehow or other, steps were taken and we were, like, the door was just about open, but we never.
We never
through it.
got to a bus
Right,
service.
we never actually. So, it would seem that that would be potentially a good means of getting this done rapidly because it already exists. You know, maybe we could actually assist it in terms of providing more passengers for the service. But I think we need to get a lot more detail.
Yes, I agree. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mark.
I think I agree with that would be a very good one to connect with. The details were that actually Marcia got a grant funding to implement it, then the pandemic hit, and so it never actually got implemented. And so that's where it went. I would put a higher priority on the intra-town stuff rather than the inter-town stuff personally. I mean, I think they're both very important, but I think the needs for people to get around, Concord's pretty big, and the need for people to get around, and we have a lot of different groups that Phil articulated, you know, in terms of quantifying that I think need the service. So just in personal view, I think the intra-town one is higher priority a bit than the inter-town one.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what Phil and Nick are saying. I think should be very high priority. I think I would even expand on the idea of, you know, the market study of all the possible users and benefits, because that may take some time to reveal. You know, if you start with no service and then you have a service, people hear about it and then more people use it, et cetera. So there are groups that would be served that exist now, and other groups that might appear once the service is there. You know, one of the broad questions could be this regional versus local service. The most important thing, I think, in terms of really keeping the ball rolling is to figure out the funding models beyond you know, pilot grants and things like that. And I've had a conversation before with Nick about how there's with different models, there's you know, the ongoing cost of running something, there's the startup costs and you know, capital costs, et cetera. So kind of the consultant could look at what's going on in neighboring or equivalent communities and how their funding and everything is working to start something that just doesn't peter out after 2 years or be subject to another financial you know, thumbs down thing. Something that could actually be continued to grow and improve and interlink with other aspects and things. So I think that's I don't know if I've explained it very well, but you know, how do we get to this also kind of what to quantify financial benefits, which can have to do, you know, may take 5 or 10 years to realize in terms of vitality and service to everybody. Another thing that might be useful when Nick is talking about the intratown function of identifying where certain destinations are. You know, I'm thinking like, even if you just have an intertown, this may be kind of a naive thought, but even if you just have an intertown service, if it had terminals of some kind at the end of the town where the next town took over, that's the way things used to be, the stagecoach station, the train stations. So trying to identify, you know, Emerson Hospital is a thing, Baker Avenue stuff is something, you know, maybe we can turn the Rotary into a big gathering place.
Yeah.
With MassDOT's money. And anyway, so kind of where the terminals are, I don't know what you would call it, where the gathering points are for a service. I mean, the micro trains
transit
that has,
stops?
Yeah, terminus.
well,
Points.
terminal, you know, in other words, if I wanted to have a simple idea of a net in town of regular service, this is apart from the door-to-door
Yeah.
custom thing.
We're talking about a fixed route bus service.
Fixed route, where would be the 6 or 7 or 8, like really stops, and how do you get that info? You know what I mean? That would then
Right.
serve the whole town from east to west and north to south and all, because it is big, like Nick says. You don't realize that until you start trying to walk around. Well, you drive, it's like, yeah, it's because the road doesn't go there, but if you walk or you bike, you know that it's not the smallest town.
Right.
It's got a pretty big layout.
So the things that I'm hearing are, I'm sort of hearing why, who, and how.
Mhm.
So why, so what are the social benefits? What are the financial benefits? I would add to that, what are the climate benefits?
Mhm.
Although
Definitely.
personally, I would I think that those are easy to pull. You know, we've already articulated, I mean, Nick did a great job of sort of listing out a lot of those social benefits. I think there could be some analysis on the financial benefits and the climate benefits, but I think the why, I mean, one of the whys is because everybody's asking about it, you know, through our public outreach. We know that people need it. There's the who will it serve? How do we tailor the service? How do we tailor the service to their needs so it'll work? You know, inter versus intra. I personally agree with Nick that I think that the internal sort of how people get around Concord should be our first priority, in part because it's the thing we have the most control over. And once we get something working here and it's valuable, then we can connect it to other things, and that will make it more valuable. So there's and then there's the how, which I think is like the big, because we can talk about why public transit is good and speculate about who might ride it, but as you say, people will ride it that we don't expect to ride it. And you can see that, you know, I had a conversation with the folks down in Wellesley, which I mentioned, I think, at our last meeting, about their door-to-door transit service, and they're using that door-to-door transit service to help continue to refine and tailor the fixed route spot service that they've had for a long time. So they already know who's riding their transit service now, but I think that just illustrates that the who is going to change over time, and we're going to need to figure out a system that adapts to those changes over time. But going back to the how, you know, what are the funding models beyond grants? So I would, in terms of the specific questions that I think need to be answered, how is funding working in other communities? What's the split? You know, how are employers, developers, private schools, all these groups that keep coming up in our conversations, how are they being asked to contribute? And what are the mechanisms for collecting those funds on an annual basis? Crosstown Connect is a traffic management association, which is one vehicle for collecting funds from municipalities and employers and a bunch of other things. So should we rejoin Crosstown Connect? Will that allow us to create the financial mechanisms that we need to have sustainable funding for public transit? Are there other models that we should be looking at?
Laura, could you just repeat the buzz phrase that you used for defining what Crosstown Connect is?
Oh, a traffic management association, a TMA. Boston has many of them. They're basically, I don't know that much about it, and I don't want to give incorrect information, but look up traffic management associations. They're often voluntary. Employers will often join them voluntarily as a way to provide employees with alternative means of getting to work. And obviously that has benefits to the employer for expanding the population of employees that they can have, and reducing their parking needs on site and things like that. So yeah, Crosstown Connect falls into that sort of a vehicle for getting a bunch of towns and a bunch of employers to work together to create a service that benefits all of them. So I think that for us, the big missing piece is not so much the how and the why and the who, but the how, like how do we secure the funding that's necessary, and how much does it cost? That's the other thing, is like, let's look at our comps around the region, and figure out like what really should we be planning for.
I think that
Go ahead, Nick.
what you're talking about all depends upon what Phil first suggested, which is quantifying the different populations. I mean, if you're going to try to get funding or come up with some sort of a business model for this, you're going to need numbers. You know, how many people are going to use it? How many come out of each of the groups served? And I hadn't thought, someone mentioned about the students, and one thing I realized that I hadn't thought of before through personal experience, a lot of kids, aside from the school buses, there's the participation in extracurricular programs that are frequently not school-based, like, you know, town soccer programs that are, you know, and other athletic programs and other other cultural programs. But also there's just kids visiting other kids after school. And, sometimes the friends are on opposite sides of the town. And I know from personal experience in our home, where my granddaughter, some of her friends are on the other side of Route 2. And it means somebody's got to go fetch her, or the other parent has to come here and pick up their kid. And, it's quite a bit of, and it always comes at the worst time of day, so for the parents. Anyway, so I think that's another possibility, is another group to quantify.
Yeah,
But qualification is it, need numbers if you're gonna go anywhere with your how.
I
yeah,
mean, the private schools are certainly, something to question about their usage. But getting back to the funding essentially, I wish that, well, I would like to see, and I think it's important in Concord. I have a feeling it's important in Concord, given the way the town is structured and financial decisions are made, that a case be made, if possible, that this will either make money for the town or will be a break-even thing with all the other benefits of climate and community and all the things that I think that being a little cautious and maybe even pessimistic about people who look at the cost side but not the benefit side, if there's quantifiable financial benefits. I mean, for example, if an employer does not have to provide so much parking space, if parking lots could be used for something else like housing or other community service or business, it all interacts. The parking thing is very complicated. That's something that, but there is a lot of work on that. So anyway, I'm just thinking, I think it'd be great if we could make the case that this actually is a no-brainer, even from a purely financial point of view. And I have a feeling that case may exist, but I don't know how to get there.
yeah. I mean,
Well,
some things are very difficult to quantify. Go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
I think it's one of those classic cases where someone needs a vision that they can hold out for the town to believe in, and that vision includes growth in the right directions. Let me say it that way. I don't just mean growth for the sake of growth, but I mean, growth of the use of this transit that then engenders economic vitality and improvements in, public safety and, just benefits to distressed communities, just, things that are supposed to be, we allege, are part of our vision of what we want Concord to be. But I think you have to start with this picture and paint this picture so people can visualize it and show what Concord could be like, right? That's where you start. You have to start with the vision if you're going to sell it. You have to
I
paint.
agree. I think that a lot of that vision has been articulated in Envision Concord. So I think that taking that and refining it is the task.
Well,
It's
I
not,
think you've got to tighten that vision up. I mean, it's got to be reduced to very simple things that you can actually visualize that are coherent and speak to what people currently see as needs. And what
yeah, I agree.
I mean, an example to me that pops into my mind is, would you rather money be spent on widening Route 2? Is that going to help you? Or would you rather have,
make it harder to cross. It's called making it harder to cross Route 2.
Making it harder to cross. No, I'm just saying this is exactly the, or another one is like, suppose somebody said the MBTA would disappear, the trains would disappear. What would happen to Concord? More cars for sure, right? And, so I mean, there's the plus side of the vision and there's the scary side of the vision. And I don't know. I think for people who get it or believe in this, the case has been made, but I think for the larger community that pays taxes, the case has not been made.
Right.
And
No,
we shouldn't shy away from the challenge that said, we want to add a $2 million a year item to the budget. And if we can say, and the benefits will be for sure more than 2 million, including all kinds of intangibles and larger things. I mean, that to me, that's the kind of game we need to thing we need to create.
It's
And-
interesting, there's a very long-term part of the vision too, which is the MBTA right-of-way the best use of that corridor for moving people, both over long distances and short distances? It's
Well, I
really,
do think we're getting a little off topic with that point. It's also not in our jurisdiction, so we may not
well,
wanna.
no, but I said very long-term, so, I don't think it's, no, but if you think about it, never mind. In some ways, the old days of the streetcar were better for the vision we have than today with the cars and the trains the way they are. That's all.
But it's also, I mean, another piece of this too is to figure out why people get in a car and for short trips, long trips, or, does it make sense that you have to drive to the train station? I mean, all these things. I mean, these need to be kind of picked apart. It fits in with the market research and constituencies, like what would be the quantifiable reduction in traffic and parking needs, and I mean, some consultants should be able to put numbers on that, of some sort.
So to me, it sounds like the thing that we need, and whether we can get it from the study or if this needs to be, this is sort of moving beyond the scope of the comprehensive transportation and mobility study. So I would hope that we could fit at least part of this in it,
Yes.
is a vision and essentially a business plan for a
Kind
local
of, yeah.
public
A
transit
vision and
service.
business plan, a vision and business plan. It does involve money expenditure, so it's a vision and business plan combined. That sounds better than a vision, because a lot of people are like, oh, vision,
Yeah.
it's like somebody else's vision. Yeah.
Business plan is probably not the technically right term, because this is not a
Whatever.
business, but
Financial,
you know,
financial plan.
and financial,
Financing plan.
yeah, and
whatever,
financing
funding
plan.
or-
funding plan. I
Funding-
like that. Or
The word funding keeps flipping in my mind into this grant thing. And grants should be the icing on the cake or the
Yes.
kickoff. They can't be the continuous thing, right?
Right.
I agree,
I mean,
yes.
naively, I'm not an expert, but that's how it is.
That is 100% true. I mean, as we saw with the pilot, it's possible for us to win a grant and get something started and then lose the grant. And if we don't have a sustainable funding plan in place, that service disappears immediately.
Also, you mentioned the 300,000, the fact that this might be rolled into somewhere into the $300,000 line item. I would wish that there would be a $30,000 specific item just for continued development and work or grants, or, or, what I'm saying? I don't be, like Alan Cathcart had mentioned, at one of our meetings, somebody chops something in half and who suffers, it's not, those decisions at high level don't make sense. So anyway,
But I do
think
think
if we
it's
could
our,
advocate for some continued small amount of research money in addition to the Stantec study would be beneficial.
Yeah.
But every year we spend some money on it, or it has some priority in staff.
well, I think that the most important thing for us right now is to articulate, what do we need? Like, what is the thing that needs to be produced? And then we're gonna figure out who's doing it, how is that work being funded? Are we doing some of that work? Is that gonna be a part of, a staff person's job?
Or consultant.
Or do we need to have Stantec do it? Do we need a different consultant? I think what we need to articulate first is exactly what do we want? Because what we don't want is to say, well, we're gonna have $30,000 in the budget to work on public transit. But what does that mean? Like, we really need to we're at a point now where we need to be specific, and we need a really clear, I like this, vision and financing plan for public transit that would include market research, a vision for service, cost estimates, and like the operational funding plan, all the potential sources and the vehicles for collecting those funds. So,
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I would suggest that the TAC is the right group to develop that. The first part of it anyway, the part that I've heard us talk about today that I liked is you can imagine almost like laying out a street map and saying, here, if we did fixed route service, here are the routes, here are the stations, here's who it would serve, and and then attempting to quantify that, right? And you know, something that perhaps the TAC could do through a task force or some group, you know, with
Or
public.
subcommittee.
Yeah, subcommittee, task force. I'm not sure what the distinction is, but, you know, some group that's really interested in this, to try to map it out. I mean, there'll probably be stumbles, but let's get started.
Those are my favorite words. Let's get started. All right, so I do want us to move on to other items, but in terms of our next step on this, it sounds like we have articulated, and I'm just gonna repeat this so that I make sure that we're all in agreement. We need a vision and financing plan for a local public transit service that would involve market research, a vision for service, cost estimates, operational funding, and under that sort of heading, sources of funding and vehicles for collecting those funds. Is that what that's what we need?
Well,
I
yes,
would-
but
I
I'm
Nick?
suggesting,
Yeah.
yeah, I just want to narrow that down. I'm
Sure.
suggesting the first step is just the vision and the route map and the explanation. It's the verbal part of that without getting into the funding and trying to qualify it all, because I think we need to have, we don't even know what we're talking about to try to get funding for at this point. So we need something that's a little more concrete, you know, that we can, in terms of the system that we're trying to create.
So service type and route map is sort of
Right,
what you
like
see
that,
under
yeah.
that, like vision for service.
And who would be served, you know, so you, and you can try to quantify that, but you know, if it made the, you know, if you had these stops, it would mean you'd get these populations participating.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like something that Stantec would be asked to do. Would be to lay out a route, a couple of route maps or some, I mean, does that make sense to people?
Well,
I
except
think
they
they'll
don't,
need our input on that.
Yes, of course,
Yeah.
but I mean, it'd be a back and forth thing where you show it to the community and say, no, that's not enough.
well,
whatever.
let me challenge that, Mark, because
Mhm.
I think you need to know the town pretty well to come up with a first attempt at that route map and the group served. And to
Okay.
expect Stantec to develop that knowledge and then do it is going to be expensive and probably not effective. You know,
Probably right.
why can't we just do that ourselves? We know the town well enough, you know, we and the residents know the town well enough to take that first shot.
Well, everybody here could just write down a list and we could put it on an agenda and pick out a first cut network.
I think that I'm gonna put this exact item on our agenda next week, next time that we meet.
Mhm.
And I think that what we should do is between now and then, we could do it in two ways, I think. We could either each go home and write down, you know, a vision for service and bring it back, and then we kind of workshop those together as sort of like sort of what is our shared vision for what we think that the public transit service should look like. We had talked about doing that and it kept getting kicked down the road because we kept getting requests for other things. So I think that we could do that each individually between now and our next meeting, or we could set a subcommittee to go and have a separate meeting and come up with a draft of something for us to beat up at our next meeting. What strategy works best for this group? Or we could elect one person to go and write a draft. Doesn't have to be a subcommittee. If somebody wants to volunteer. Nick, I feel like you have a good vision for this if you wanted to
I mean,
write
I could
something.
I could take the next shot at it. You know, I made a start with the first document and, you know, I try to amplify that. I don't think that us trying to pull together 5 things as a group in the TAC during a 1 or 2 hour meeting is going to be very effective. So okay, I mean, I'm willing to take a next step and, I might, within the constraints of the open meeting law, I might ask specific people to send me questions, send me info. I don't know. I probably can't do that, but I'll figure it out. If I get
I don't
stuck, I'll
have-
bring it to the
I'm
next.
working with Nick, volunteering to work with Nick.
Okay.
Not set a subcommittee, but talk to Nick. I have a few ideas about.
Okay,
you
good.
know,
There's 2 of us.
Bus stops or bus stations and then the question of how to connect them. and
Are we
all
sure that that's allowed within open meeting law? I
It
don't
is
believe-
if it's something I'm doing and Mark just helps me, it's okay.
I just volunteered to help him. I'm not being assigned.
You have to have a quorum. I read the open meeting.
Right, okay, well, we're not forming a subcommittee. Okay, well, Nick, you're taking that. You're
I'll
gonna
take
do that and bring it back. I would say, though, I think that each of us that are not working on that should at least think about it and maybe come with a few bullet
Yeah.
points.
Yep.
Just so that we have a sense, so everybody's thought about it before we have that conversation.
Yeah, I
So,
think so too. Can I throw in one other
Go
thing?
ahead.
And that is, maybe the role of Stantec might be, if they have this expertise within their shop, to provide us with some information about the financials and some of the sort of common obstacles, common solutions, et cetera, for implementing this kind of service, because Concord is not the only municipality that faces these challenges. And there may be certain opportunities, vehicles, not cars, but programs, means of financing, means of implementation that are sort of, either a pattern or a custom or required by law or by regulation or something else. So maybe there's somebody in Stantec that will say, yeah, I'm the public transit person. This is how it usually works. Here are the usual challenges. Here's, the 3 ways that it's been solved in, 5 different places in Massachusetts or 5 different places in New England or 5 different places in the country, something like that.
I strongly support that, and I think we had maybe talked about just if they could just collect the information from the surrounding towns, nearby towns that have some sort of service and lay that out for us in terms of what it costs, exactly what groups they're serving, the number of people they're serving, what the ridership numbers are, what what their funding source is, and whether or not the users pay for it and how they pay for it, the mechanisms. We need that data. We're just blind without that, right? And Stantec, that's what Stantec is good for. That's what we should ask them to do.
So just to plug that into sort of what we've articulated so far, it sounds like what we want from Stantec, especially in this early stage, is their market research. Comps from other communities that are similar to ours, the typical transit rider demographics and what works for them, best practices in the industry.
And financial.
And financial, yeah, and maybe basic financials as
Yeah,
well.
but I want hard numbers. I don't want, just base statements of best practices. I'm not interested in that at the moment. I just want to know how exactly are they funded? What are their ridership levels? What are their subgroups of riders? What did they think they were going to do versus what they're actually doing? Just how do they determine whether it's successful and sustainable? Okay, very specific, quantifiable things.
Okay, since we're making a specific task for Stantec, the more specific I can be in this, the better. So regional comparisons, and what you're asking for, Nick, is funding sources.
Not regional,
ship
town. I want to know
numbers.
specific, specific towns. Like 5 or 10 towns that are not
Town
far
by
from
town.
us, including
Town by
ones
town.
abutting us, like Lexington, Acton, and Bedford, plus Newton, plus whatever others we know have similar services to what we are fantasizing about. And I want to know exactly what the ridership levels are. I want to know the characterization of the demographics of those ridership. I want to know what the total funding, what the expenses are every year for the service. I want to know what the funding source is. I want to know whether or not the riders are paying any of that, or if it's totally paid for by the town, or what fund, where's the money come from? Right? And I want to know whether the town is actually owns the resources and the people, or whether they contract it out. Okay. So I want to know exactly how this business is structured in each of the towns and whether or not it's successful. I want to see numbers that indicate success or failure.
Excuse me, can we right now agree on a minimum set of specific towns? just to.
That would be
help,
great.
Just. to
Yeah,
make sure that-
Acton, Bedford, Lexington, Newton. No, I don't know any others. There was one
But
other.
you're talking about a number of towns.
I'm saying that just to aid Stantec, so they don't have an additional thing about which towns does Concord want us to analyze. If we say,
Acton, Bedford, Lexington, Newton.
Acton, Bedford, Lexington, Newton, and, possibly some
There
other
was,
towns.
didn't
that they
someone
think
mention,
will-
didn't Aaron or someone mention one other town? I forget. That's doing it. They're using the VIA. Oh, no,
Newton,
it was
I believe it's
Beth.
Plymouth.
Beth
Beth-
mentioned another town.
I think Beth was referencing Plymouth. She was referencing another historic town that was further away.
Plymouth is not a bad idea because they got a big road running through it. They got, things
Yeah.
sort of, that's not a bad.
I do
Um,
think that we should have some slightly more. We should zoom out, and
Mhm.
because I think that, we kind of know what's happening in Bedford and Lexington. Aaron
we don't.
prepared those reports
we
for
don't.
us.
We don't have all those numbers.
We
Not
did
have
look at,
numbers.
we did look at the funding breakdown and the cost. I'm be happy to pull up those,
Yeah.
those finance sheets again, but we did get the full picture. We pulled
It was Lexington and Bedford.
for just
We did-
Lexington and
We
Bedford.
did not see budgets. We did not see what their annual budgets are. We did not see any details. I don't think.
Nick, I have to push back on you. Aaron and I we did a presentation
Please
where we
send it out.
showed,
Please send it out.
yeah, I'd be happy to send it out again. It's available through the FTA, and it's a breakdown of their annual budget and all of their funding sources. With what the breakdown is between state funding versus local funding versus fare box revenue,
Yeah.
cost per rider.
Mhm.
That would also be helpful in terms of tasking Stantec to say, could you provide this for several other towns, this equivalent stuff, or this plus some missing things that we find missing?
Okay,
Well, we are more similar to Plymouth than we are to the abutting towns, and I think,
In some ways, yeah.
yeah, if they could perhaps suggest some towns that have more of our situation, historic, big.
Salem.
Salem, yeah.
they're a little bit more dense than we are.
They are, but I mean, again, like you're saying, reaching.
Yeah,
you
I
wanna
think
do- Get a
there's,
sense.
yeah, there are some places that are doing it really well. I mean, you'd be surprised. There's some places out in, the Pioneer Valley that are doing public transit
Mhm.
much better than we are
It would be
here.
good to.
Terry has her hand up.
Well, let me just close out this by saying, we've got, so what I have written down, Nick and Mark, is we're asking Stantec for regional comparison, or what we want out of the study. One of the things we want out of the study, let's be clear about what we're asking for, is an analysis of regional comparisons from 5 to 10 other towns, including some of our abutters, including ridership numbers, demographics of ridership, cost, funding sources, fare policies, municipal staff, and is the municipality staffing and owning the buses, or are they using a contractor? Some places we'd like to look at are Acton and Bedford and Lexington, but we'd like other comparisons from the region, perhaps Plymouth, Newton, et cetera.
Yeah, the only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is you twice used the word regional when you started describing it. I'm not interested in regional personally. I'm interested in town by town. They may be in our
Okay.
opinion or not. Just, I would take the word regional out of there because I think it's a distraction.
Okay, so just to be clear, would you be happy to have a comparison from Western Mass, for instance? Or would you be interested in having a comparison from some
I
other
would-
part of the country?
I'm open to Stantec choosing some towns based on their knowledge and
Mhm.
experience. That would be fine with
Does
me.
Great Barrington have a service or not?
Who?
It'd be interesting to know.
Yeah.
And
I don't think
they do, but anyway.
Great
but-
Barrington.
But again, getting to the vision, the vision thing, if the vision has been realized in other towns, that helps make people take our vision more seriously.
Okay.
I just want to add that Acton, Franny Osmond would probably, she's the one who started Crosstown Connect. And she knows all the grants, all the costs, all the everything, and she'd probably be thrilled to come to one of your meetings or send you all the stuff. And I think you do have a lot of stuff from Bedford and Lexington. So I think you're going in a great direction, but not to have Stantec repeat what you already have access to.
But yeah,
Yeah.
the problem,
But-
Terry, is that we don't have any staff, right? We're just a
Right.
committee. We don't have time, we don't have the time or the access to the staff people in other towns to
But
get.
Stantec could compile all those in a uniform
Right.
organization.
They
Yeah.
could,
Well,
but I think also it'd be great to hear from Franny. She would be so thrilled to come out and tell you how she created this from scratch. They had no transportation of a public kind in Acton at all. And she's the one who got it all started, figured out how to do the grants, figured out the market research. She could tell you the whole story or send it to you by email. And I think you do have stuff from Bedford and Lexington already. And then, so Stantec could take that stuff and put it all together for you if you wanted.
I think inviting Franny to our next meeting would be great, and I don't know if, I know that they had a change up in staff in Acton around their transportation planning role.
Met her.
Franny Osmond, yeah, she's great, and public transit is her passion. So she's really knowledgeable on the subject, so I think it would be great to have her come to our next meeting. Would that be valuable to others to hear what
Sure.
Acton has been doing? Nick, would that be helpful?
Ask her the same questions you wrote down for Stantec,
Okay.
and so she's got a heads up
Sure.
about
Sure.
what we want to hear.
Personally, I'd like to see numbers and stuff. I mean, our meeting time is really valuable and, we don't meet often enough to get all our work done, so I'd rather, that's me, that's me.
Well, I will resend the financial sheets for at least, I will enjoy this homework project. I'll go back into there's the Federal Transit Agency has all of the breakdowns for the budget and the financing sources for like almost every public transit service in the country. It's very, very interesting. But I can pull out the ones for Bedford and Lexington. The numbers get weird around the pandemic. That's the only thing, is that if you go back, cost per ridership is much lower, at the pandemic and even after the pandemic, the numbers got pretty weird. Both I think for funding reasons and because the ridership numbers tanked. So just have that in mind. I'll send out those sheets. And I will make sure to include those when I make this request to Stantec. So in terms of next steps, we have articulated what we need to move forward with local public transit. Like we need a vision and financing plan. We've kind of articulated the framework for that. So the next step is that Nick is going to sort of give us a first draft of a vision for service. And then we're going to talk about this at our next meeting in 3 weeks. We may invite Franny to attend. Maybe I will commit to at least talking to Franny between now and then and seeing if it would be good for her to come. And because I'm not really sure what's happening in Acton. All right, and then I will have a meeting with Steve Dukran, who's managing the contract with Stantec. I've been going through him when I need to talk to Stantec. So I'll have a meeting with Steve to talk about, to relay what we've talked about today, and figure out how we work with Stantec on the sort of market research and cost funding estimates with Stantec. Do those all sound like good next steps?
Yes.
Okay, anything that I've missed?
Well, just one quick question, in terms of being specific, so we're asking Stantec to look at what's going on in other communities and kind of vacuum up, collect any ridership, breakdown demographics that exist in those towns. With regard to Concord, are we asking for the market research demographics or not, and how would that be done?
For Concord?
Yeah, no, I just want to be clear, are we asking Stantec to look at other towns or do something with this town? Maybe it's premature.
What we've talked about today is looking at other towns.
But, okay,
Maybe
I just want to be clear.
Maybe we circle back to that question once we get to looking at the data that came out from the survey. All right, with that, I'm just gonna pause here because I know that there were some questions from the
Public.
Peanut
Public.
gallery.
um,
You're too young to know about that. You know what I'm
You've heard
referring
that,
to?
I have heard the term the peanut gallery.
You know what it refers to?
No.
The Howdy Doody show.
Oh, that is a bit before my time. Um,
Or
All right.
else you look marvelous. You never know you were 89.
all right, did anybody have any questions about this public transit service? Just remember to introduce yourself.
Ellen Quackenbush, 206 Prairie Street. I love what you're doing in terms of researching other towns. And I would just reinforce about a bunch of people said this. There's what I would call as a science for latent demand. I think, and so if you look at what happened in other towns in terms of they introduced it and then what happened, because what's going to happen is people can go, oh, I don't want to do that. It's not going to be, you know, frequent enough. It's not going to go to where I want to go. But to figure out where to go is essential. I mean, you're right. It's doctor's appointments. For me, it's like, how do I carry, if I had a bike, which I don't, how would I carry all my recycling on my bike or my backpack? And so there are some ideas that people like me, who I'm a senior citizen, but you know, I walk a lot of places, I would take mass transit. And it's not because I can't ride or can't bike or can't walk. It's because I choose to patronize mass transit because I think it's a great image for Concord. So I think there's a lot to be done. You look at what's happening in the town. And then I would ask for people, you know, widen up the task force and ask for volunteers. I would be one to try to figure out what the plan might be and the costs and the startup and all that. And it's probably also the idea of having hubs. Why not have them multimodal so that you've got bike, you know, racks at this hub. There's a train and there's the mass transit, because I know in West Concord, people come from Cambridge, probably working at the wheelhouse. You can walk there and you can come to Concord Center and walk to downtown. But I'm sure there are other places that you like in GenMed too, you can't walk. And that's kind of, you know, Emerson has a bus from Framingham to bring employees to the hospital. So there's lots of great ideas that you could pull together. Anyway, thank you. This is like very exciting.
Thank you, Ellen. Mary, did you have something you wanted to
Yeah.
ask too?
I just happened to be cleaning up my things and I found this, back in 1993, I attended this reception for Clinton and Kennedy.
Mary, I did want to keep these questions
Okay,
short, and if
okay,
you
this
have a
is important.
longer,
Okay, yeah, this is important. I met a man named Samuel Beer. I didn't know who he was. Turns out he's a very famous, prominent man. I stood next to him. I spoke to him many times on the telephone. My aunt told me who he was. I went to the library, got his book. This man, he's very famous, so I don't know if any of you ever heard of him. Samuel Beer, well, we all should.
How do you
He
spell
was
his
a
last
prominent
name?
professor at Harvard. He's world renowned. He's known to presidents of the United States. This book, which I got out of the Concord Library, is called The State and the Poor.
Mhm.
Everything you're saying about transportation, he said in this book. My aunt, who went to law school in the 20s at Fordham, when I told you, oh, he's so famous, she was reading his things in the 40s. This is important. I'm bringing this to this town because what we need is, first, the town, the committee, buy the book on eBay, it's in the library, read what he wrote about transportation. Everything he said, he's not saying, let's find out how many people in town need this or that. There's always going to be young people, there's always going to be middle-aged people, and now there's going to be more older people living longer. That's always going to happen as long as we're on the earth. We don't need that information. We do at the end. What we need is, this town has never made a statement on the need. We have done nothing for the railroads. This town, in the middle of the 1800s, the train came through West Concord and Concord Center. Does the town do anything about that? The train built up Concord, built up. We do nothing about the trains. We have made no statement. The town has made no big statement. And I'm sorry, I'm going to use war, but let's use a football game. When you have a football game of war, you do the whole thing on the table and you put, this gentleman said vision, you put the whole thing on the table. Use Samuel Beer, what he says about transportation. Use the whole thing on the table of what we want for transportation. This town stood up at the revolution on the bridge and said, we want a free country. This town has done nothing, made no statement. In you know, I've done a lot of research on this town, and by the way, 35 years ago, I invited the people from L'Express over to this town, had raised money for free lecture series to do this. It was in all the papers to bring L'Express to Concord. So I am mad because I'm sitting here 35 years later. The town has made no, as this gentleman said from Monument Street, the town has made no vision statement. In 1862, the selectmen, at the end of their report, did something out of whack, I mean, not out of step. They made their whole feeling about the Civil War. No, this is important. If they can do that, we, the selectmen, there's many things I'm not, all of your stuff is important. No, this is, but you know what? If we don't do this, these are little things, they'll never come together. They made a statement in their, you know, annual report. It's got to start from the top. Do you think the state's gonna take us serious, anybody, if the selectmen say nothing about the trains, there's gotta be a broad statement, and there's a lot of, and as far as meeting like Mark and the gentleman from Monument Street. Nick, to get together, if this isn't in the bylaws, what open town meeting, but you had an idea that you should find out ways, because Ellen has a wonderful brain, and citizens can come together to meet and give what we think to you, because you're right, this committee, we're never gonna, you all are wonderful, but I've seen committees, but you're a small group. The work is not gonna happen this way. It's gotta be broader and it's gotta be serious.
I
And I have
appreciate
many,
your,
and by the way, Holland does it. They have connecting. I live there. They have trains, they intermodal things.
Mary,
they
we
have
do,
buses.
thank you so much. I do appreciate your
You see
passion.
why I'm mad,
I-
because
I do.
32 years ago,
Yeah.
if I had done if you had paid people to come and say this, and then you came back 35 years later, nothing was done, you would be mad too.
Oh,
I'm not mad.
I
at you,
feel
I'm
ya.
mad at the
I
town.
feel you, Mary.
I'm mad at the town.
All right, so we do have 3 more items on our agenda, and we need to be wrapped up by 12 o'clock. So I am gonna move quickly, and I'm gonna hold all of the rest of our public comment until the end for today. Just moving on to the next item on our agenda. And as I said, we're going to continue public transit, our discussion next week, and we can incorporate those public comments into what we talk about, not next week, our next meeting, which is in 3 weeks. All right, so the next item on our agenda is the FY25 update and next steps. And I was actually hoping, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Terry, with no notice, but I was wondering if Terry had, or maybe even Carlin Reed, I'll put either of them on the spot, about what they know about the Public Works budget. I know that there has been some movement on this since the 29th, and so I'll hand it over to Terry if you want to give us a little bit of an update on what has happened on that.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Yes, the town manager has, and the finance director, Anthony Ansaldi, have already weeded down all the budget requests from all the different departments, including Public Works. And a lot of it was cut. I think he requested 4 million for road work, and he's getting 2 point something million. Too bad I don't have the numbers right in front of me. But then there's another 600,000 coming from the Chapter 90 funds, which is the state funds that we get every year for road work, which has never kept up with inflation, and all the towns are always lobbying to get it caught up. So 2.7 million out of 4.2 million road work is going to be funded if this budget, the way it is now, goes through town meeting.
Do you know what the status was on sidewalks and pedestrian, and I think the line item was pedestrian and cycling infrastructure?
No, I can send you an update. What happened was your excellent support letter did not make it to the select board meeting on time. So do you remember that? So I brought it up at the meeting, and then it finally went to the select board the day after, and then meanwhile, Anyway, the finance committee is putting pressure on the town manager to make more cuts. We're not at the guideline yet. Nor is the school budget. So there's a lot of work to still do, but it's in the wrong direction. So, if you want, Laura, at the next few meetings, just remind me and I can bring it a very quick 1-minute update to each of your next meetings.
That
but
would
I-
be
I
fantastic.
don't have the numbers in front of me right now.
So
Excellent.
I have a quick question, Terry or Carl, and I had a note on my calendar that the finance committee was going to have a public meeting on the 18th regarding the DPW budget. Is that still correct?
They are meeting on the 18th. I am the new select board liaison there. I don't know the agenda, but I can get that. And the way it works is the finance committee has one meeting where they talk about how the town is going to get to guideline. And that would include public works and all the other town departments. They have another meeting where they're going to talk about how the school is going to get to guideline and all the things within the school. So yes, Phil, I believe that they will be talking about this on the 18th, but I just don't have their agenda.
Okay, thank you.
And Carlin, did you want to add to that? I saw that you you added your video. And if you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Just a moment. Carla Reed, 83 Woods End, member of the Finance Committee, speaking on my own behalf. Yes, we do have an open Finance Committee meeting on January 18th, beginning at 7 o'clock. It is at the Select Board Room and it is by Zoom. We anticipate looking at a revised budget for the town, which is all the line items, not just public works, but all the line items. And I think we might actually also be hearing a presentation by the Solar Task Force in addition to that. But it is an open public meeting. There will be a time for comments. So if you want to come and join us, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you.
I have not seen the agenda yet. We'll probably get it soon. And when we get it, it's also posted on the town's webpage under the Finance Committee website as well. Thanks.
Laura, can I add one more thing very briefly?
Sure.
There are the public hearings that the Finance Committee runs in February. And it would be very important to have TAC members come to the one where they're going to discuss the town budget. And that way you can make public comment that you think you want to see more money in sidewalks or whatever you want, comments you want to make. I think they listened very carefully at that meeting, and it will be in February. They have that series of meetings on all the town meeting articles. You want to go to the one about the budget, town budget.
Just writing a note to myself. All right. Thank you guys for that update. Are there any action items on this that the committee members see?
Well, I was planning to attend on the 18th, and I don't know what my calendar tells me I'm supposed to do next month, but I'll plan to attend as many meetings as I can that are relevant to what we're doing. So I'll put those on my calendar.
So I want to mention one thing too. So if it certainly makes sense to go to finance committee meetings where things relevant to transportation are discussed. If there was to be back and forth or new statements of opinions on things in the within the charge of the TAC, then you know, got to be careful if a quorum of our members are present or listening or whatever, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But there's no problem with saying that, you know, reading from or citing the letter that we've already written, that's public domain. So anybody can advocate from that, even a quorum or anybody, you know what I mean? It's not something we've deliberated and written.
I do wonder if it might be worthwhile for us to select a section from the letter and have one member go and speak on our behalf at the 18th.
That is certainly a powerful thing.
And then perhaps we could even take what we've written in that letter and refine it ahead of the February meeting. We'll have a meeting probably before that public hearing. So we could have something that is adjusted to reflect.
It's the tax speaking, not an individual.
Right, and because I think that that's the difference, is we could all attend as individuals and make our own independent opinions known, but I think it's much more powerful when we speak as a group that says the TAC really doesn't feel like the town is spending enough on sidewalks or plowing and the items that we've all discussed. And so I think that if we can figure out precisely what we as a group want to say, that would be helpful. I mean, we already have the letter, as you said.
People, I mean, the public counts on these things,
Right.
right? This is a recipe for potholes. This budget is this cutting of the budget cut is a recipe for more potholes.
Unfortunately, our letter is very lengthy. I'm looking at it now and I'm trying to think like, how would we say that? I think that we need to sort of condense this into, the 90-second public comment that would be appropriate at a public meeting. Would somebody be interested would somebody volunteer to condense the letter into something that's bite-sized?
When, do we have a meeting between now and then or not?
We do not have a meeting between now and the 18th. So
Next Thursday.
it's next Thursday. So Terry, go ahead.
Laura, okay, first of all, the other meeting is, the date is March 7th. That's the
March-
big public hearing on the town budget and other budgets.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Also, condensing is a great idea, but you can ask to enter the entire letter into the public record at both of those meetings.
That's a great idea.
I think that's the way to go. We could also, if we just elect somebody to speak on the behalf of the TAC and enter the letter into the public record and summarize the letter, I would feel very happy trusting another member to do that work.
It's gonna be you or me, Mark.
I'm traveling next week, or I would volunteer to do it.
We can both go.
All right,
I think we'll both go.
all right, let's do it.
Okay, does that,
Strength in numbers.
I don't think that requires a vote, but Nick, do you agree
I'm
with that?
fine with that. Yep, it's good.
Okay. And Dan, you're
Yeah.
okay with that? Okay, so Mark and Phil, you guys are gonna go to the meeting on the 18th.
Yeah.
Enter our letter into the public record and summarize the key points.
Right.
For the,
Yeah, it's all
yeah.
in the record. We've
Yeah.
deliberated on it. It's fine.
And I think that at our next meeting, if we're able to meet before February 7th, since that'll be an even larger meeting and we'll have more information at that point, we may want to have a little bit of an update between now and the 7th. Go
I
ahead, Nick.
think, I think one of the points, I think this is in the letter, but the embarrassing fact is that the town has made virtually no progress on transportation and mobility since the creation of the Envision Concord plan.
Right.
They should be
And the
pointed.
date is March 7th, not February 7th.
Oh, March 7th.
Yeah, March.
Oh,
Correct.
thank goodness. We're definitely gonna have time between now and then. Okay. Okay, so I think that, yes, one of our goals should be sort of echoing what Mary stated, making a statement about where we should be going and the fact that we need a budget to get there.
I think the
Um,
point is that the statement was made in the long-range plan, and it is the responsibility of the select board, helped by the finance committee, to figure out how to implement the town's long-range plan. Either that, or they've got to stand up and say, heck with it, we're not bothering with that for transportation, because that's the
Well-
way it's turning out.
Well, TAC is the select board's creation to advise us on this.
We are not the budgeting people. We are not the ones who are turning down the funding requests, okay? It's beyond us at this point.
Correct.
I do think I do think that a strong public statement at the March 7th meeting, if we aren't able to win back some of the money that's needed for the things that we've supported in that letter from the 29th would be great.
We could.
I'm okay with putting it to the select board and the finance committee and saying, look, we can stop wasting our time on the transportation and advisory committee if transportation initiatives are not going to be funded. Personally, I have no interest in continuing to participate in meetings if we're not going to do anything as a town. It's just a waste of time.
For the March 7th meeting, I don't see any downside to also consider at our next meeting whether to declare it as a attack meeting also. That might bring more of the public.
Mhm.
And
I think-
everybody can speak completely freely.
So I'm putting on our next agenda is to prepare for the March 7th meeting. I think that we will have more information about what specifically has been budgeted and whether the town manager responds to our comments on the 18th. So I'd say we write a new letter, we write a statement to read at the meeting, and we declare it a joint meeting so that we can all attend.
Yeah, freely, yeah. Keep the option.
Um,
It makes a statement too. It's like we exist.
Yes. Well, I also think that, yeah, I mean, I think that we have in the town, the study is a reflection of this. We love to talk about what we should do and what we could do and what we might do and what people might want. But the actual budgeting for an intersection redesign seems to be beyond us. You know, we can talk about how we need to do something at the crosswalk at the library, but we don't have any money in the budget to actually do something at the crosswalk in the library. So we really need to make it clear that culture is what needs to shift right now.
I'd like to
think
make a
it's great
distinction.
opportunity.
I'd like to make a distinction between the town's professed values and what it actually does.
Yes, my favorite phrase is, this is an opportunity for us to encourage people to live into their values.
Ooh.
Can we take a vow?
Yeah.
All of us will appear before the townhouse, including the selectmen, all elected officials, all the citizens, and then we will go forward.
I love it. All right, so we have 2 more items on our agenda. I'm gonna leave it at that for today, and we will revisit this. Thank you, Mark and Phil, for taking that to the meeting on the 18th. So the last 2 items on our agenda are safe routes to school and the comprehensive transportation and mobility study. I would like to propose that we actually cut the comprehensive transportation and mobility study from our agenda today. We only have 30 minutes left. And we only got the survey results on Friday, so I didn't get to dig into them as deeply as I would have liked. We could maybe if we have a few minutes at the end, we might be able to talk about them briefly. So I sent out, so we're going to talk about safe routes to school is what I'm trying to say. I sent out to the committee a copy of the motor vehicle crash reports from the 2 crashes that happened in 2023. So for context, for those of you who might not know, we had 2 students struck on their way to school in 2023. One child was hit in West Concord at the beginning of the year in February, and had to be airlifted to a hospital. And the second child was struck at the beginning of December on Thoreau Street, presumably on their way to the high school, given the age of the student who was involved. And so we have the redacted crash reports at this point, thanks to our very helpful staff over at the police department. And, you know, I wanted to bring this to the attention of the TAC. I know that Phil has worked really hard on safe routes to school in previous years, and has done a lot of meeting with school administrators and working on the events that happen every year. They call them the flagship events of the walk to school days and the bike to school days. But I think that this is an opportunity for us to step back and say, what do we actually need to be doing about safe routes to school? We had 2 children, you know, we're not a very big town. We had 2 children struck on their way to school last year. Both of them were in marked crosswalks, which I think is worth pointing out. Both of the children were following the rules, but and the drivers were not following the rules.
Mhm.
So I wanted to open this up for discussion first, and then I had some, I want to acknowledge that this is just the beginning of a discussion. I don't think that, I think that this is going to need to be on our agenda moving forward for quite some time, and we're going to need to be engaging a lot of folks on this topic. So with that, I'm just gonna, I don't know, Phil, if you wanted to add anything to that, because I know you've been sort of the point person on Safe Routes to School for the town for a while.
I can tell you that, efforts are continuing through the school department. This year, the Thoreau School has a new principal who is, from Pittsburgh prior to, being principal in Concord. He's very enthusiastic about the program and has, overseen a number of additional, Safe Routes efforts. So, Thoreau School will be taking the lead on a winter walk day on February 7th. That's been, put on the calendar, and we're organizing that in collaboration, with the school, police department, hopefully the, public library and, the Harvey Wheeler, Center. The other, thing is that, the principal has asked the staff at, the Safe Routes to School at the state level, to, help to create a, walk audit. And the idea behind the walk audit is, to have, both, citizens and, the local and state staff review where the children are coming from to get to the school, where the crosswalks are, what the issues are in terms of safety, visibility, etc. So you can imagine this, one of the, crossings would be at Old Stowe Road. The next one down is Conant Street, and the next one down is, it's not Pine Street. It's, pardon? There's Brown Street, and the next one down is where the school is. West Street. So each of those, are on Route 62, which is a very busy road. Commuters are often exceeding the speed limit in the morning. You sometimes have issues with solar glare, that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of, analysis that's done. And then as a part of that, the state makes proposals for, both, local and state participation in terms of actual remedies. So one of the things that could happen would be one of those yellow flasher type things, or some other means of slowing down traffic, for example. So that's in the queue for, being undertaken in the spring, or perhaps, the following fall. But, you know, that it's a slow but steady progression, but I think we're getting some real traction now that we have, I think, some interest on the part of the school department players to participate. I think the last thing is that, the Safe Routes staff and I made a presentation to the school committee, about 6 weeks ago, just to give them an update about, you know, what we've been doing for the last year or two. And, you know, they were welcoming of us and, encouraging us to continue our efforts to, promote, safety amongst the school children. So, things are slowly but surely actually happening.
Great. Any questions, either about the police reports or about the program that as it has, as it stands right now from committee members? Yeah, go ahead.
So, yeah, so a couple of things just kind of for clarification. So I'll mention some thoughts and share some thoughts, and then correct me if I'm wrong or whatever. So Safe Routes to School, can designate a potential source of funding from the state with the program to actually change physical infrastructure, which is useful there. From a certain kind of high level point of view, you know, naively, we're talking about places where, two different modes of transportation where somebody is much more vulnerable in one mode, are crossing, right? And so it's, you know, as Phil was starting to say, kind of just mapping out, even for people to think about and prioritize or get a global view of where those locations are. And even especially highlighting ones where there's been an accident or some other kind of danger report is important. I came across, well, I noticed the thing about the solar glare. That's an interesting point. I found myself that when I'm driving in a car, there is I found that there's a need to you know, proactively say there's a crosswalk, slow down, look around, not just assume that if a pedestrian is not obvious, there can't be any pedestrian there, because people can be hidden, people wear different color clothing, there's lighting effects, there's the sun, things like that, just because you don't see somebody right away. But I think speed is really a key. I sent Laura a couple of an article and then had a link to another article where the linked article was a study somebody did about enhanced crosswalk markings compared to standard ones, and do people actually stop for somebody, I assume, who was like an actor about to enter the crosswalk, like not in the crosswalk, but you know, it wasn't exactly clear what was done. And what they drew out from it was that the enhanced markings made it somewhat more likely for someone to stop, but only if they were traveling between 20 and 30 miles an hour or something like that. And then somebody else in a blog took this and actually made a really good observation that the data actually says that the crosswalk marking doesn't matter, the speed matters. The vehicle speed matters. Keeping the cars under 20 miles an hour makes a tremendous difference in terms of whether they pick up that somebody there's a pedestrian there, somebody wants to use the crosswalk. So I think that, you know, correlating this with where the accidents happen and distractions, the one near the high school, it's a straight stretch and you're heading towards a big highway. So I think people tend to drive faster.
And the accident report does show that that person was cited for speeding in that.
Right,
in that
so
location.
speed is certainly, you know, it's an obvious thing, but I'm just kind of putting it on the table for brainstorming. Speed is an obvious thing. The other accident, it wasn't necessarily speed, but that's a super confusing, busy area, right? With a lot of distractions.
So one of the things that's
Yeah,
worth
Commonwealth Avenue.
that's worth noting is that
There's been
intersection
change.
has since been redesigned. That happened to be a happy accident that was already funded and in the pipeline. But the improvements there have made crossing safer, that we created, I say we, the Public Works Department and the engineering team added bump outs, which daylights a crosswalk. And for those who are less familiar with those kinds of terms, daylighting is when you remove parked cars from around a crosswalk to make pedestrians, especially smaller pedestrians or
Yes.
people in wheelchairs, more visible. It also shortens the crossing distance, which means that the pedestrian is vulnerable for less time. And it makes it very clear that somebody is about to cross the crosswalk because they are standing in the bump out, waiting to cross the crosswalk. It makes it very clear. So bump outs are a very well-researched way of reducing the risk to pedestrians at those crosswalks. So fortunately, that confusing intersection has become a safer place for pedestrians since this incident happened. And I would 100% agree with you on the speed issue. I have pulled up in my screen. I don't want to share my screen because my screen is a mess right now. But there is a wonderful, not only does speed cause collisions because people are not paying attention, but the risk of fatality, I think it's always worth reminding ourselves of this. The risk of fatality of being hit by a car traveling at 20 miles per hour is 5%, or we're only 5% fatality rate at 20 miles an hour versus 30 miles per hour, just 10 miles per hour more is 45 versus 40 miles per hour is an 85% fatality rate. Those 20 miles an hour make a huge difference. So if somebody is speeding going 40 miles per hour on Thoreau Street, that is an 85% fatality rate if they were to strike a pedestrian. So speed is both about the likelihood of an accident and the fatality risk if an accident does occur.
That was an estimated speed by.
But yes, that was an estimated speed, but it's just illustrative. I mean, like I ride my bike on Old Marlboro Road and there's an actual there's a
Yeah.
camera there that tells you how fast you're going. And I am routinely passed by people going 43, 44 miles an hour.
Wow.
What's
the speed limit there?
It is a 35 mile per hour speed,
Yeah, this is 20.
Right.
Thoreau Street,
right?
What was the
Um,
estimated speed?
40, by an eyewitness.
And.
So, can I just jump in? I want to say, Mark, that I agree with you 100%, that, you know, the speed is, the key element here in these,
It's certainly a
in
big,
these
it's
various
certainly a big.
places. And one of the real challenges, is how do you address, changing the speed limit on a commuter arterial? And the traditional way has been to do a speed study, which is, a budget item that requires, depending on the, you know, the corridor, a lot of money, a lot of time. We already know we don't have budget to fill the potholes, so we don't have a budget to fill the speed, a budget to fund the speed study. So, allegedly, the state has changed their policy with respect to speed studies, and permitted towns under certain circumstances to apply to the state Department of Transportation to change a speed limit without having a speed study. But this is one of those situations that used to be referred to as FUBAR. Mary, do you remember what FUBAR was? Anyway.
How do you do that?
So this MassDOT has not come up with policies or regulations as to how to implement the state's policy. So, while theoretically it's possible to change the speed limit in some of these places, as a practical matter, no one actually knows how to do it, and it hasn't actually been implemented as far as I know. So I think this is an opportunity, since, you know, we have people coming in and are gonna do a study which is being, at least in some respects, sponsored by one part of MassDOT,
Mhm.
to see if we can get another part of MassDOT to have a buy-in to change the speed limit on Route 62, even if it's like rush hour only or school hours only, that kind of thing. Because it gets increasingly complex, because at least parts of that corridor are absolutely outside of the defined school zone. West Street probably is within the school zone and could have a 20-mile-an-hour during school hours. But there was some debate about whether or not it was actually within the footprint of what could be defined as a school zone. Believe it or not. So very complex kind of thing, bottom line. But at the end of it, I totally agree with you.
I mean,
Big
if speed
danger
is a
is
fact, speed is a fact.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, at least at the moment, I think we should put all things on the table. So for example, you know, the legal speed limit and the markings and things has challenges, there's obstacles to that, and then a certain number of people say, I can go twice the speed limit, or I'm only going 20 miles over the speed limit, or something like that. We've had discussions before about speed bumps and things. It'd be good to know, regardless of whether plowing or ambulance or fire or police say it increases response times. It would be good to know where the town actually has the authority to put speed bumps if it wants. You could also put those grooves that, you know, 100 or 200 feet before the crossing in certain areas where it's high risk, et cetera, that just is, wait a minute, what's going on here? Okay, there's a sign that says slow the hell down. You don't have to have a speed limit to say slow. You know, it's children crossing, you don't have to have a speed limit to say, you know, somebody's been injured here, you know, whatever. And other towns have, you know, have speed bumps and whatever. I got caught in Providence, Rhode Island once going a bit over the 20 miles an hour with an automatic, capture thing, and I got my fine in the mail, et cetera.
It's not legal in Massachusetts as of right now.
Well,
Photo
it
and,
should be, it
it-
should be. It should be for school zones. It should be.
right,
You know what I'm
right to
saying?
our legislators. There's
Yes.
actually pending legislation,
Okay.
in the state we could
Let's show
write,
that. Yeah.
we could write a letter to our legislators saying
No,
that
I
we
mean-
support
I mean,
it.
There's a balance of freedom and responsibility,
Absolutely.
you know, and I have found, I know something eventually is gonna be changed in you know, Main Street Town Center with bump outs, et cetera. I'm waiting for that to happen, but I have noticed my own experience. Especially because of the large cars parked right next to the crosswalk, I have to assume there's somebody in the crosswalk, because without the bump outs, there isn't a reaction time, and there are a lot of people that come to Concord once upon a time and assume, oh, this is this nice little safe area, and they jump out or they're distracted or whatever.
That's the daylighting.
So, yeah, I think we have to change driver behavior one way or another.
Yeah.
By hook or by crook.
You could, you took the words out of my mouth. There was a wonderful quote that I saw that was, well, now I can't remember it, but it essentially said that we build our streets so that children can't make any mistakes, and drivers
Oh, God,
make
yeah.
tons of mistakes, and drivers can make all the mistakes. So we can't I think that one of the dangers in safe routes to school is we need the pedestrian safety curriculum in the schools, obviously,
Yeah.
but an overemphasis on telling the children to be more careful needs to be balanced with forcing drivers to be more careful, because they are the ones that are operating the 2-ton vehicle.
My own personal
I
feeling
wanna
is
say
that
one
the
thing.
safety system doesn't have 3 levels. It's not a safety system.
Yeah, I
Nick,
think,
go ahead.
I think discussions about speed limits are a distraction. Since speed limits aren't enforced almost anywhere in Massachusetts, I don't think that changing them makes much difference. You know, if people were getting tickets for speeding consistently and, you know, in much greater volume than happens today, it might make a difference. But I think the discussions around physical changes to the roads are and other things that will slow people down are much more productive in the short run.
Speed limits in both of these accidents were 20. And
It's a very good illustration of how speed limits don't necessarily solve the problem.
well,
They
and
don't solve, they're a distraction. If we put our energy into speed limits, we're wasting our time in the short run.
Yeah. The bump outs at Bradford Street make a huge difference. I mean, I drove there yesterday just to look, and it's very obvious. If somebody's standing there waiting to cross, you can see them. And the same needs to be done in Main Street in the center, because, you know, there is the case where you need more daylighting of the crosswalks.
Yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned about you know, it's an obvious thing, but to think about the fact that why would somebody be in the bump out unless they wanted to cross? So it's a communication, it's a language. I want to cross, I'm in this bump out. Whereas suppose somebody's on the sidewalk, even the edge of the sidewalk, they might just be hanging out there. So it involves multiple parties. Another thing just about crosswalk markings that occurred to my mind is, I don't think that there's any reason why. I mean, crosswalks are probably, there's a law about minimum width, but I don't know how it would hurt a pedestrian to have a crosswalk that was painted 10 feet wide. It would be much more visible with foreshortening to a driver.
That would be a good
On
question
a
to
fast road.
pose
Do you
to
know
our
what I'm saying?
engineering.
Because you can't
The-
see this 3 foot wide crosswalk with foreshortening. It's just a little tiny white line. It isn't like there's a there's a pedestrian vehicle crossing.
I agree with you. I think that as with all things design oriented on our roads, they're always more complicated than you think. It may be that you would then need to put rumble strips all the way across 10 feet across with I think that would be a
Yeah,
good question
but-
for our
And you
public
lose
works
more
department.
parking
Also,
spaces, too.
by the way, with the markings by the library, you know, the
Mhm.
signs and things like that. Somebody in Bedford at the crossing of the Reformatory Branch Trail they put an additional vertical yellow reflector on the actual post, narrow.
Mhm.
It makes it way more visible because it isn't just another sign. It's like, oh, there's this vertical yellow.
Is this over by where the train is?
This is.
Oh, just putting
on
a
Route
reflect-
62, where the Reformatory Branch Trail
The
crosses.
daycare center.
At near the daycare center.
Okay,
They've upgraded the signs and it stands out. Now, maybe it's just because it's new, but again, things that highlight that this is a big deal crossing. There's
Yeah.
gotta be ways to do.
The flashing lights I find to be the most productive. I mean, I don't miss a crosswalk when I'm driving any of the crossings on a new extension of the Bruce Freeman. And you do have to stop on your bike and hit the button, but they're immediately there. And cars do stop for those.
Yeah.
So we are coming to the end of our meeting time, so I want to sort of summarize what's been discussed so far. I like how Mark put it. I wrote it down. We should put all things on the table at this point.
Absolutely.
And I think that there are lots of things engineering wise that we could be talking about. You know, permanent traffic calming measures that you mentioned, like speed pumps. I would add to that quick build traffic calming measures. So things like daylighting an intersection could be nothing but a little bit of paint or a sign that says you can't park here. There are low cost bump outs. Obviously, putting in granite curbing, as we've done in West Concord, is very expensive, but there are plenty of places where they've made a bump out with paint and flex posts. We had MassDOT come and propose that as a potential option on Route 2. So we know that that's compliant with the regulations around signage and such and markings. Flashing lights would be a permanent traffic calming measure. Speed limits we've discussed. I think that the main thing is that we're at the beginning of this discussion. I think that there are a lot of potential action items, like for instance, writing a policy that says we're gonna daylight every crosswalk within a half a mile of every school before the end of 2024. That's probably something that we could do within the budget that probably wouldn't cost us any money. So I think that we should be examining some potential action items that we could take on a short-term basis. The thing that I wanted to highlight, one of the reasons I wanted to make sure we talked about this at this meeting is that the Safe Routes to School program is hosting a webinar on Wednesday, January 24th from 12 to 1 p.m. And this is for municipal staff, which is transportation, mobility, public works, planning, police department, public health, etc. Any Safe Routes to School task force members. We do not have a task force, so we're probably the closest thing that we've got to that in the town. And anyone interested in learning about the whole community approach to Safe Routes to School. I actually drafted a letter, and we're kind of running out of time, so we may not have time for this because I drafted it last night at 1 o'clock in the morning. But I wanted to send this webinar to the town manager, the superintendent, the police chief, the Department of Public Works, and say, it would be good for us all to be on the same page and at least all have a base understanding of what is available to us in terms of support at the state level for tackling this problem.
Date again?
Some school group.
Here it is. It's the 24th at 12 p.m.
What about school committee and, did you say that? I don't.
I would like to send it to the school committee and as well,
Yeah.
the school committees, and I don't think I said that, but I have it written here. We're coming to the end of our time, so I can't really ask you all to read this letter and edit it and send it out. But if you feel comfortable with me writing a letter to those groups, asking them if they would attend this webinar as a first step, I'd be interested to know if you all would support that.
That's fine
Yeah.
for they need to know.
so the only thing I would add is it's not a first step.
No,
It's
no,
a
no.
follow-up step.
It's not a first step. It's a continuing step. Although it is the first time the TAC will have
So
taken
the date.
action on this.
January
date
24th, 12 p.m.
Yes.
Do you want to forward us the letter?
Well, here, I've printed out copies if you
Oh.
want to look at it. But I don't have one for Nick. Could hand it to you, but that wouldn't help. But essentially it says, reaching out with a shared concern regarding the safety of our students, citing the fact that we had 2 separate incidents where students were struck on the way to school. In light of these incidents, we'd like for municipal staff, group committee members, school staff to come together with members of the TAC and take proactive measures to ensure the well-being of our students. As such, we extend the invitation to this webinar. Information about the webinar, as it's described on the website, and then I think that it said, our hope is that the knowledge gained from this session will help launch a broader community commitment to creating an environment where families feel safe walking, rolling, and biking throughout the town of Concord. So if we're all in agreement, I will just send that to the town manager's office, the superintendent, the police chief, Alan Cathcart, the regional school committee, and the Concord School Committee.
Send it, put Steve.
It's like-
Duke on
And
it.
maybe CC the select board, or no, I'll send it to the select board too.
Put Steve Duke on it.
Okay, Steve Dukran as well. What did I just do with my pens? No, I got it. I'll add Steve and the select board. Are we happy with that? Nick, how are you feeling? You didn't get to see the letter.
I heard.
Okay. Okay. So should we have a formal vote on that? That we're gonna,
If you want, I move, so moved.
Second.
A quickie discussion on the motion.
sure,
Instead of using the word launch, I would use the word expand.
expand. Where do we want to say? Expand. Expand, okay. Expand the discussion, the discussion. Okay, great.
Where's that?
It is our hope that the knowledge gained from this session will help expand our community's commitment to creating an environment. If you,
Oh, okay. Okay.
Thank you.
okay. In recognition of Phil's and many others' excellent work on the
Yeah.
Safe Routes to School
We've been
program.
working on this for years.
You have been working on it for years, it's true. We'd like to see it come out into the mainstream.
Yeah, no, I think it's good.
Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
past service.
All right.
Do I get a watch?
So we're gonna take a vote?
So are we gonna take a vote? Are we happy with that?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
All right, so Phil.
Aye.
Mark,
Yes,
Dan,
Nick is yes.
Nick is yes, I'm a yes. All right, so we're done with that. I'm gonna close out our discussion items and open it up for liaison comments. Oh, wait, actually, before I do that, we need to talk about our next meeting. We're meeting 3 weeks from today. Which would be actually the last week of January.
That's 30th, right?
That's the 30th. Mariana, I need to connect with Mariana about whether Tuesdays at 10 work for her. This may not be the best time, so I will send out a doodle poll for
Okay.
that, or an email getting a time for that week. But the week of the 29th, 30th works for folks?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, and with that, Terry, do you have any liaison comments for us?
No, I've talked enough. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Anybody on Zoom? We've had a very quiet Zoom here. And no Zoom bombers, fortunately.
Oh, okay.
All right, Mary, go ahead.
Phil mentioned he's on the safety for schools. Since 1982, 83, there have been 2 town meeting. One approved it, sidewalks money, and started with Old Stowe Road. Town manager pushed it through. Turns out it was just general money, never got built for Old Stowe Road. Every single solitary person in my area, we all wrote what we had to do. Town manager told us, never got built. Steve Schaefer left. I found out, actually, there was another warrant article produced by the town to build the sidewalk on Old Stowe Road. And it got taken off before town meeting. And one of the selectmen, I didn't know why, but at that time, I couldn't do anything. If we're gonna have a safe crossing at the bottom of Old Stowe Road, I urge you all, and I asked you all before, drive up and down that road. And if you're lucky to live by the time you get down the road, but it's true, And there was before COVID, I was sitting right here, there's a public works meeting, and a man got up and he was all mad. He lives on Hill Street. And he said, his son is at school after hours. And the man has to drive at night to go down because he doesn't want his son to walk up Old Stone Road. How many years? You're all gonna be so happy when I'm not here anymore because I'm still living and I keep saying I was here. That was 1982. I have the record. I didn't know that in 1989, the town brought it up to be a town meeting to vote on it and they pulled it. I didn't know about that. I found out in old public records. So twice it's been headed for, to have a sidewalk. And as I said, and then we did everything Steve Schaefer said. And everybody in the whole area voted for it. And it was not done on ours, but you know what? Cambridge Turnpike, all the people in that area found out what we did. They also said to Steve Schaefer, we wanted a sidewalk too. We're not against that, but that one got built. Old Stone Road didn't. So if we're gonna do the public safety for schools, I please beg of you on my hands and knees. You guys, you obviously will have more clout than we ever did in the area. That road needs a sidewalk. Now we have Amazon, all the things, you get it?
I get it.
Yeah.
It's an obstacle course if you live to walk on it. And people do, there are more walkers on it, bicyclists. I almost killed somebody coming down one day because he was going on, jogging right in the lane I was driving on,
Yeah, all it takes is one distraction.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be me. I don't want it to be me who's killed that person.
Yeah.
I don't want a person killed.
Right.
I'll be sure first I live right blocks from there, and we'll ditto that it's gonna be dangerous. I know we aren't talking about the survey, but is it possible to get the verbatim of the comments on the map included?
They are, yes, we have verbatim,
Oh, you
all
do?
the
That'd be
comments.
great.
We have like, here, I can give them to you. You can have my copy. I think I cut down a small forest to print this out. It's very small. You might need a magnifying glass.
That's okay, do you have it
But-
electronically?
I do. I can email it to you.
Just email it to me.
Yeah.
I went through all the survey and I would love to see the comments because to the point of where would a mass transit service go? A lot of the information is actually in the map of like, oh my gosh, I can't get to so-and-so place. I can't get to Emerton. I can't
Yes,
cross.
there was some
Right,
good,
Right?
yeah, we will be revisiting this at our next meeting.
Yeah, well,
So,
thank you for a great meeting.
yeah, thank you. Thank you all. All right, I would,
Move to adjourn.
thank you.
Second,
All-
Phil,
I.
Mark,
Aye.
Dan, Nick. Did we lose him?
Aye.
He's flown away.
He has adjourned himself. All right, well, I also am an aye, so that's the end of our meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.